If you're just getting started in parks on the air or looking for antenna solutions for even your most challenging activations, this video is for you. We have 5 options that'll help you handle small urban parks, sparse mountaintops, the desert, and those beautiful tree-lined vistas. And we know we've activated many of these locations. Plus, we'll share the one tool we keep in our kit to make our POTA antennas come to life. Stick around. Hi, I'm Jim N4BFR, the lead instructor at Ham Radio Prep and a founding member of the World Radio League. Just like there isn't one right radio for every activator, there isn't one right antenna for every Parks on the Air activation either. Let's talk about a few things you need to consider when you roll into a park to set up. They need to include terrain you'll have to leverage, power and modes you're using, and if you want to homebrew or buy a kit. Oh, and we'll use the term POTA quite a bit in this video as an abbreviation for Parks on the Air. When we say terrain, we're talking about how the land is laid out in the location you're going to activate. Let's pick 2 national parks and contrast the option. Acadia National Park is along the seashore in Maine. While it has a few rocky cliffs, it's mostly a beautiful drive full of trees and picnic areas. Arches National Park in Utah is another beautiful location full of cliffs and rocks. It has a desert terrain that doesn't allow you to just loop a string into a tree and activate, so you'll need a different plan there. Other areas will have different terrain challenges. If you try and activate from the top of Mount Washington State Park in New Hampshire, you're not only dealing with a lack of trees, you have historically harsh winds to manage. They even see snow in September, so you may not want to spend a lot of time outside setting up your gear. There are opportunities to activate 3 parks at once when you visit the top of Mount Washington, so it is lucrative. The mountain is in the White Mountains National Forest, and the Appalachian Trail runs over the top of the mountain. So if you're trying to get that threefer, definitely take into account planning your antenna when planning your activation. Let's consider our options for these 3 different locations. For Acadia National Park, I like the option of a simple wire antenna. Either an end-fed half-wave or a wire dipole will do. An end-fed half-wave antenna generally uses a single wire. You'll have 2 connection points, one at the far end of the wire and the other at a feed point where you attach your coax. A dipole antenna will have 2 wires with each getting connected in the air. The term for wires on both antennas is a radiating element, and we'll just call them elements going forward. Now the middle of a dipole will have a balun or unan. These are for matching your antenna's impedance to your feed line. In this scenario, I can gently leverage the trees with a light throw line and temporarily mount one of those options. Part of that antenna selection might be impacted on exactly where in the park I set up and what I want my antenna orientation to be. In 2023, I activated Acadia Park and I talked about my antenna orientation strategy. I set up my antenna 10 minutes ago, oriented it south, so it's best southwest because I'm way up in the northeast, and I am rocking it this morning. Without even calling CQ, I already picked up 6 park to park, so I am definitely going to get my 10 and a whole bunch more. 40 meters is sounding great. That's the exciting part of doing a park to park. You never know what you're going to get, or doing a parks activation. You never know what you're going to get, but when you get a lot, it's awesome. Let's just recap that. Antenna orientation, particularly with a wire antenna, is important. If I'm in the far northeastern United States, I want an antenna running north-northwest to south-southeast, so the broadside is pointing west-southwest toward the US population centers. That worked for me. I ended up making 67 contacts that morning in September 2023 from US 0001. While we're in New England, let's drive the 215 miles to Mount Washington State Park in New Hampshire. You can hike to the top. You can take the cog railway, but we're going to drive. Once you get to the top, 6,288 feet above sea level via the autoroad, you probably won't want to spend a lot of time outside in the wind and cold. Remember that sunny day I was in Acadia in shirt sleeves? Less than 2 weeks later, on top of Mount Washington, it was snowing in September. Operating right from your car or truck makes a lot of sense here. A great way to do that will be to use a mag mount vertical antenna on our vehicle. A mag mount simply means a magnetic base that you can attach an antenna to. A really popular one is called a hamstick. These are mono-band antennas with elements you can assemble in the car and pop out on your roof when you're ready to operate. There's no need to worry about directionality here because verticals are omnidirectional. Depending on the band, you may want to use some radials to enhance your signal performance. Definitely a place you can experiment with your antennas. Here's one more quick note on doing a Mount Washington triple activation with the state park, the forest, and the Appalachian Trail. To activate a trail, POTA rules say you need to be within 100 feet of it. So check your maps carefully to make sure you qualify when you set up your station and before you submit your logs. Now, I'll admit I've never been to Arches National Park, but it is a goal. From the pictures, it's clear there aren't many trees or much of anything you can use to mount an antenna. Let's say in addition to that, I want to hike a bit away from my vehicle. That means my antenna requirements will likely be something with its own standard mount that I can deploy along with my gear. I've used a commercially available antenna called a Dipole for this type of activation before. Now, Dipole is a brand name for a trapped dipole, which uses some hybrid parts for his elements, and we'll explain that in a minute. You can see in the background here from my activation at Canada's Marconi National Historic Site. This is a rare site with only 13 completed activations, and my 70 contacts in 2023 is still second on the all-time list for QSOs, I'm proud to say. Remember, QSO is ham radio shorthand for a contact. I chose this antenna because of the lack of trees at the location and a desire to do no harm to the surroundings. Do no harm is the principle you'll leave the location as good or better than you found it. No spare rope in the trees, no trash on the ground. With the Dipole, I can put up this antenna and take it down without a trace. As we just covered, what antenna you will use depends a great deal on your site selection. And I frequently bring multiple antennas with me. That helps me adjust on arrival at an unknown location. The biggest factor you work with may be the size of the area you have to work with. It can really make a difference depending on the location you're going to activate. Let's look at 5 antenna options you might choose for your next activation. We'll sample all these antennas for 20 meters, probably the most popular POTA band. The 20-meter wavelength indicates about a 64-foot signal wave. Half-wavelength antennas are usually considered the sweet spot for the deployment, so 32 feet. Dipole. Let's start with a single-band dipole specifically tuned for 20 meters. This half-wavelength antenna will be 32 feet long end-to-end. With a feed point in the middle, each element will be 16 feet long. We'll use this as our reference antenna. End-fed half-wave. As explained in its name, this is a half-wavelength antenna, so its single element will be about 32 feet long. Instead of a feed point in the middle, an end-fed half-wave typically has a 49-to-1 balun at one end where you connect the feed line. Vertical. Before we get into hamstick verticals, let's include a normal wire antenna deployment. I like to think of these as a dipole on its side. Our vertical element will need to be 16 feet in height. When we deploy radials, which are ground elements usually, you'll typically deploy at least 4, so you'll need a 16-foot circle to accommodate that in your activation space. Mag mount vertical. These elements come in 2 parts. The whip is a stiff piece of wire that's around 3 feet long. That mounts to a shaft that's a little less than 4 feet long. So your 16-foot vertical antenna is physically reduced to just under 7 feet in length. Trap dipole. Your element on a buddy pole style antenna will have 3 pieces. They call them the arm, the coil, and the whip. The arm is 22 inches long and the coil is about 5 inches. Those are the fixed length parts. You'll then add a telescoping whip to the end, and for 20 meters, they recommend extending it to 48 inches long. The total length on one side is just under 7 feet. Thus, your footprint is about 14 feet for a 20-meter deployment, but could be up to 16 feet for other bands. So when you look at the chart, you have 3 antennas: the dipole, the end-fed half-wave, and the vertical that typically use a half-wave length of material for their elements. Then you have the mag-mount vertical and trap dipole that are physically shorter. So how does that work? Both the ham stick and buddy pole use principles to appear electrically longer than their physical length. This is done with something called a loading coil. On the ham sticks we used for our mag-mount vertical, they're in the shaft. If you feel the element, you'll find a small wire wrapped around it. The longer the wire, the longer the band you can use. There's roughly twice as much wire wrapped around the shaft of a 40-meter ham stick antenna compared to a 20-meter version. So if you're a fan of working the longer wavelength bands like 40 and 80 meters, it's more of a compromise to your antenna performance when using a ham stick. It's a similar principle with the buddy pole, which has exposed loading coils in the element. The loading coils are adjusted to tune the dipole to different frequencies. It's also considered a compromise antenna because it doesn't extend to a full half wavelength on most bands. So what's the downside? In general, with a dipole, if you set up on 20 meters, you'll be able to operate the entire band with no adjustments. Switch from CW to digital to voice in one activation all you want. With trapped or coiled antennas, that effective part of the band is much smaller. So you'll probably need to make adjustments if your 20-meter CW activation turns into a sideband voice event. The positive sides to these antennas are generally the ability to operate in a small footprint. Let's say you wanted to activate Martin Luther King Jr. National Historic Park in Atlanta. The only practical place to set up is the parking lot. So fitting your antenna on a vehicle or in a parking space will help you get that park activated and in the log. Now, it's time to choose some antennas for our Go kit. Let's consider our options from a versatility and price perspective. And before we do, let's remind you that Ham Radio Prep does not get paid to endorse any product, but we may get a commission if you purchase through our links. The simple classic dipole can be made at home with inexpensive parts. We like the LDG 1-to-1 balun as our center point, and it's only $30. For another $10, buy a 100-foot spool of 16-gauge speaker wire from Amazon, and make several different dipole lengths for the bands you want to use. Check out our YouTube channel for an instructional video on building a dipole. You end up with multiple band dipole options for less than $50. You can use the same pieces of kit to make a homemade vertical as well. Grab an extra spool of wire for your radials because they really do make a difference. We've also seen people using mesh screens in place of radials, and it's something worth experimenting with. For the end-fed half-wave, we're gonna buy instead of build. Radio Waves has a nice basic end-fed half-wave for $120 that covers 40, 20, and 10 meters, and there are other brands too. These are the most popular POTA bands for sure. Having a multi-band antenna makes it quicker to adapt as you get into the field and the bands change. In my personal Go kit, I have the end-fed half-wave for my antennas. That antenna covers all bands between 40 and 10 meters. I made more than 500 contacts on it during one weekend park activation, which makes me a fan. You also find brands like Spooltenna in this category. There's one thing to watch for here. There are QRP-sized end-fed half-wave antennas, so make sure the one you buy is rated for the transmit power you want to run. QRP ones are usually good for 10 to 20 watts. Let's shop for ham sticks for your mobile mag mount setup. A lot of hams we talk to like the Shark version available through Gigaparts. This pack gives you 5 bands for under $125. You'll need that magnetic base, which will run you about $50. So that means a 5-band mag mount setup all in is $175. One thing nice about the Dipole is that it's a complete, well-organized kit you can take on the go and adapt to almost any environment. It covers 40 meters to 2 meters and can be deployed as a dipole, vertical, or other combinations. It's a nice kit and it's currently priced at $279. All of these antennas can be dialed into specifications at home, but every field location is different. Water, rocks, grass, desert, all of these will play a role in your antenna performance. With an antenna that's set up and dismantled every time like a ham stick, how do you know if it's resonant? We think the one tool every ham should have in their kit is an antenna analyzer. And let's be clear on what an antenna analyzer does. This is not the same as an antenna tuner, which matches the feedline impedance at your radio. And a tuner is helpful to have, but a much more effective way to use your signal is to make your antenna as resonant as possible. Now, resonance simply means how close to your operating frequency your antenna is configured for. An antenna that's not resonant generally does not effectively convert your signal into a transmission. Instead, it turns that mismatch into wasted heat. Antenna analyzers can help you get your antenna resonant, but how do you do that? Well, once your antenna is set up, you use the analyzer to take a measurement. You can then decide whether your antenna should be higher or lower, or your element should be longer or shorter. The closer you can get to 1.1 to 1 SWR, the better. But anything near 1.5 to 1 is in the sweet spot. Now, SWR is a term that means standing wave ratio, and it's a measure of your antenna's performance. 1.1 to 1 is about the best. Use caution if you get above 3 to 1, because you're really losing signal to heat in that scenario. I've used some different versions of analyzers over time. The one I currently have in my kit is the blue Rig Expert stick. The one I wish I bought is the yellow version, because that goes up to 500 megahertz. We found that on sale for just over $300. One type of antenna we haven't covered yet is the screwdriver, or active tuning antenna. Now, these are typically motorized verticals that you can adjust their resonance. With a push of a button, you match your antenna to the current frequency. Our friend Mike, KEANHH, likes the Yaesu ATAS version for his activations, but he keeps options too.
Well, the ATAS is the workhorse of the antenna family for me, because when I'm doing digital, I can change digital modes and digital frequencies very easily with the ATAS and the rig control from World Radio League that's attached to my equipment.
Okay.
It's very, very easy to do that. Now, when I'm using other modes other than that, I like to use the ham stick, because it's portable and I don't have to go out in the elements. If it's cold outside, I can get in my POTA environment and not worry about it.
The Yaesu ATAS version runs about $350, and you probably want to pair that with a Yaesu radio in general. If you don't have a Yaesu, Diamond makes a similar antenna called the SD330. It runs $430, and you'll need additional accessories to handle the interface between the radio and the antenna. We've covered some of the easiest antennas to set up in different situations, but there are plenty more options worth mentioning before we wrap up. Random wire antennas. These look a lot like end-fed half-waves, but instead of a 49-to-1 transformer, they usually use a 9-to-1 balun. You can cut them to various lengths, and they rely on an antenna tuner at the radio to make them resonant. They're cheap and flexible, but performance can be a little hit or miss depending on the setup. Trapped verticals. Earlier, we looked at a trapped dipole. It's the same idea, but on its side. Companies like Chameleon, Wolf River Coils, and Dipole all make portable trap verticals. For instance, Dipole calls theirs the Buddy Stick. These shine when there aren't any trees around or you want a really fast deployment. Mag loops. These compact antennas are usually a loop about 3 to 6 feet across paired with a variable capacitor. That's basically a fine-tuning dial for resonance. Many mag loops cover 10 to 40 meters and pack down small, which makes them great for activations in tight spaces. The trade-off is power handling. Most are limited to around 20 watts, so they're best for QRP or light-duty activations. Linked dipoles. Imagine starting with a 20-meter dipole, then adding extra wire sections to extend it to 40 or even 80 meters. That's the concept behind a linked dipole. It gives you multiple resonant bands in a single antenna without needing a tuner, just by clipping or unclipping sections of wire. Now that we've seen the full menu of antennas, let's circle back and highlight our top picks. There are lots of great options available, but for a new ham getting started with POTA, or an experienced ham looking for new options, we have a nice selection to start you thinking. Our top picks include build your own dipole or vertical antenna for the field. It's an inexpensive project costing you less than $100, and it will give you massive flexibility. My personal favorite when I can use it is the end-fed half-wave antenna. A nice multi-band version will be between $150 and $250. You can also look for various incarnations of spool antennas. These pack the antenna wire onto a reel, and the spool itself often holds the feed point or matching transformer. Just pull off the length of wire you need, clip it in place, and you've got a way to deploy an end-fed or random wire antenna. For those colder, rainy day activations when you want to operate from your vehicle, consider a mag mount ham stick. You can get a multi-band set for less than $200. Remember, these work in limited access situations too. If you buy 2 sets with the right mounting point, you can turn them into dipoles as well. If you're looking for a nice kit that gives you maximum flexibility in one bag, definitely consider the buddy pole for around $300 delivered. Don't forget a couple of our key tips to make your activation smoother. If you're using a dipole or end-fed antenna, be sensitive to antenna orientation. Getting your signal in the direction where more hams can answer you should be a big goal. Also, get that antenna adjusted as closely as possible for the best resonance. Take the extra few minutes to break out your antenna analyzer and check your lengths and SWR performance. For now, we'll wrap it up here. Subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you get alerted when our next POTA video drops. If you don't see a video on a POTA topic you're curious about, drop us a comment. It could become the next video in the series. I'm Jim N4BFR, 73 from all of us at Ham Radio Prep and the World Radio League. If you enjoyed this video, please pay us a visit to hamradioprep.com. We've got license courses to help you get started or upgrade your ham radio license. We cover technician, general, and amateur extra. And once you get licensed, you want to get involved in advanced activities. So check out our courses on POTA, HF operating, emergency communications, and satellites. And a great way to optimize your ham radio experience is at worldradioleague.com. This is a next generation logger where you can keep track of those POTA contacts, make friends in our community, and climb the leaderboard.